I think we'll get started. It's call to order. The January 25th, 2019 Oregon State Lottery Commission meeting is now in session. It is noted for the record that a quorum of commissioners is present for today's meeting. Today's meeting will be live streamed on the internet, and a link to the video recording will be posted at the lottery website. Will the clerk call the roll?
Commissioner Patel?
Here.
Commissioner Telfer?
Here.
Commissioner Valdivia?
Present.
Commissioner Wilcox?
Here.
Chair Sandhoff?
Here. Thanks. We'll open the meeting now for public comment. The public comment portion of the meeting is an opportunity to take comments from the public, but not to engage in discussion. The Commission will not respond to questions or comments received during today's meeting. As I call your name, please come forward to the microphone, state your name for the record, and if you have materials, you can give those materials to the clerk and limit your comments to 3 minutes if possible. Thank you. Ms. Martz.
Good morning, Chair Satoff, Director Pack, and Honorable Commissioners. I'm Katie Martz. I'm Vice President of Voices of Problem Gambling Recovery, and I'm a certified peer mentor. And I'm here to amplify the voices of those individuals that suffer from gambling disorder here in the state of Oregon. As someone in recovery from gambling disorder myself, I find that it's necessary to come here when given the opportunity, which I'm grateful to have every couple. Our issues are not your responsibility. I take full ownership for my gambling disorder, and I'm responsible for my own recovery. The catalyst for our struggles often has to do with accessibility to high transactive velocity games or just speed of play. And just a little anecdote, on the way here a few minutes before the meeting, a friend who suffers from gambling disorder and I were trying to recreate how many times per minute we could press a button on a video lottery terminal of what speed of play we thought, we historically had played at. And if we had done a maximum bet of $2.50 per press, we found we could do something like 60 presses per minute, which would come out to $9,000 an hour. And that's consistent with some of the losses that I've heard many of my clients talk about going through. My concern is that in as much as there are some safeguards for VLTs in this state, the compliance, though somewhat enforced, isn't across the board. I remain concerned when I go to maybe meet a mentee who's relapsing and they're at one of your vendors that has VLTs, that there's 6 people sitting behind the 6 machines and a bunch of people waiting for machines that open up, and they don't see anyone buying food or other non-lottery items. I just see people playing high speed of play games, and it really makes me question how the 50-50 rule is being enforced, that 50% of the revenue needs to come from other than lottery. I understand that's very difficult to enforce, but I want to please pressure you to do what you can to have that criteria met. I also remain concerned about the Lottery Modernization Act that in any of the drafts I've seen, I haven't seen any mention of a commitment to not have high transactive velocity games on handheld devices. And as I always repeat when I come here, having money, time, and location is the, somewhat fatal trifecta for people like me that have a predisposition to have a gambling disorder. If we're able to have money available to us, which if there's some way to transfer money into our phones, and I imagine there will be, hopefully there'll be a few steps in between that, like needing to buy a gift card and having a code, something like that that'll slow it down. But having our phones on us 24 hours a day meets the location and time criteria and could be extremely dangerous. It could also, by having sports betting on the new app target men under 24, which have the highest predisposition for developing a gambling disorder in the future. So I would love to see that be on the Modernization Act, that there's going to be a commitment to not have high speed of play games. I would also like to ask you that because there's an increased risk for the people of Oregon, that there also be a commensurate adjustment in the amount of money that goes towards both advertising, and not just advertising in responsible gaming that'll appeal to, I don't know, about 97% of folks, that we can say, you know, set a budget, set a time limit that is effective for most people. Folks like me that may have co-occurring disorders of mental health or substance use disorder, may have trauma in the past, may have had early onset of gambling. We're going to have a much higher sensitivity, and those kinds of problem gambling messages aren't going to be as effective with us. So the advertising should be targeted to, here's exactly what you need to get help early on, here's where you get help, and when they get to the places that can offer gambling services, that they're seen right away, that they're given really professional treatment, that they find that they get engaged in their treatment and stay with it, and are able to stay away from gambling in the future. So yeah, those are the three things I'm asking to sum up, is that, you know, it line items in the Modernization Act, that there not be high speed of play on any of the handheld games, that there's an increased budget for advertising, and that there's an increased budget for services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, let's move to the Commissioner Communications. If there are some communications from the commissioners, that are comments or anything that the commission would like to raise at this time?
I do have a question. Put in discussing some of how we're moving forward with some of those things.
We do, and maybe Stacy can address that as part of the impacts report later on in the agenda.
Perfect, thanks.
Any other comments or questions?
Yes, I do have a couple reports to give as part of our audit committee charter. I'm required to report on when we have an audit committee meeting, which we did have this morning. And also, at this time of the year, I'll be giving a formal overview of the year. To address today's meeting, there were no audit reports that were reported to us at this time. And an update on the calendar year 19 audit plan was presented to us with several audits. A couple of those audits will be tied into the enterprise risk assessment that's going on. Those are specifically cloud computing and cybersecurity. So those will tie into the risk assessments, and then they will be assessed there as well at the end of those completion of those audits. We also had an update from Kathy Ortega regarding the enterprise risk assessment. There was the assessment on the personally identifiable information. There were no findings on that. The register of all the items on that register were reviewed by the executive team. There were no changes to that. And then that completed Kathy's update, so there was no real changes to as we progress in our risk assessment. Then Robert proceeded to give us the audits in progress at that time. So like I mentioned earlier, there were no reports, but there may be one or two given at the next audit committee meeting. But there were some highlights given on the progress, meaning the drafts and the reporting phases of those audits that will be coming out in the very near future. Are there any questions on our meeting this morning?
No questions on the meeting that I had. Anyone?
Okay. Also, I'll be giving I'd like to just present to the Commission just our annual review of what we did as an audit committee. Basically, this report is to inform and remind us of the purpose, the authority, the composition of our meetings, as well as our responsibilities and our activities for the calendar year 2018. So the purpose of the committee is to assess the lottery in fulfilling its responsibility that oversees the lottery's financial reporting process, system of internal controls, processes for monitoring compliance with laws, regulations, and policies, including lottery's ethics policy and audit activities. The authority given to us is found in the OAR 125-700-0035, which requires each agency having an internal audit function to establish and maintain an audit committee. If the agency has a governing board or commission, and the audit committee is to include one or more board or commission members, which we do, myself and Commissioner Patino over there. The committee charter, which was approved, I believe I reported that the last time we had a meeting, it was approved in November, gives the committee the authority to conduct or authorize investigations into any matters within its scope of responsibility. Specifically, it can seek legal advice from the Department of Justice, retain independent auditors, accountants, and others to advise the committee, facilitate resolution or disagreements between management and the external auditors. And I'd just like to point out that there were none during the year.
Good.
Seek any information that it requires from employees and external parties. Meet with lottery management, employees, internal and external auditors, and other external parties as necessary. And I just want to mention on that piece, we're also allowed to meet in executive session with the internal auditor for purposes of determining relationship with the audit function and management, and if there's anything that the chief internal auditor wants to report to us in that session for us to evaluate and see if anything else needs to be discussed. And nothing has arisen in any of those meetings. The composition of the meetings, committee membership as of December 2018 consisted of Commissioner myself, Commissioner Patel, Director Pack, and Robert Martinez, the internal audit manager, who facilitated the meetings. And I just want to give a good shout out to him and his team. They're doing a really good job as far as the policies and regulations, internal, external audit, and other activities as requested by the Commission. Our 2018 activities. We reviewed action taken on audit findings and follow-up with management, hearing reports of the lottery's enterprise risk assessment process, hearing reports of the Oregon Audits Division financial audit results, and receiving regular updates on internal audit activities, and as I mentioned before, approving the internal audit plan. And so that concludes the report. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments from the commission? I have a couple. One, I talked to Commissioner Valdivia before the meeting, but I'm hoping that either we can talk about it just a minute or at least get some better understanding. I was really happy to hear you say there are no management disagreements with the auditors. How is that? So in my other life, if there is a disagreement between the auditors and management, that comes directly to the audit chair. How would that work here? How would that come to the commission's attention?
Well, it would come out of one of those, the executive sessions that I would have, Molina and I would have with the chief internal auditor. If there's anything that he's concerned about or raises to a level where we believe that it needs to be addressed, then I believe the next step would be for us to meet with the director and talk about that.
That sounds, it hit me. I thought, well, it's always good to hear good reports, but if you don't know the process, it's sometimes, we need to understand that better. The other question I had that I actually did speak with you about, and maybe you could do it for the record, explain.
Sure.
For me, I just expect good reports on the audits from this team. But some of that is about what the auditors look at is the internal control environment and how good that is. And so one of my questions really is about how does the audit committee get that report. I'm assuming that the auditors, external auditors, are looking at your control environment on a periodic basis, and they're going to give you a statement at some point about that the controls are adequate, that there's no weaknesses or significant deficiencies. And where does that, in the process, come to the commission so that, or the committee, so that you report to us and can tell us that we can be comforted that the controls have been looked at and there aren't any real deficiencies in them? And anybody who needs to can answer. Go ahead.
Sure. The main place where we would see that would be in the annual report by the Secretary of State and the external auditors that come in.
The statement would be there.
The statement would be specifically there in that report. Now, I would expect that during that audit, that if there was something that was irregular or needed addressing, that would hopefully come to our attention at that time, so we can just be apprised of what's happening.
Right.
But in all my years and associated with the lottery, I've never seen that happen.
Yeah.
The controls have been very stellar. And in that report, if you were to look at that section regarding internal controls, it specifically states what you mentioned there. Any weaknesses, any comments that needed to be made, you would see it there.
Great.
Overall. And
I had no belief that there would be. Mine was more of a process. When do we hear that? What process is that involved in? So thank you.
And then the other individual internal audits that the audit, the internal audit performs, controls are also come into play in those specific departments that they're looking at or audits that they're doing. So, and they may tie in directly or indirectly to the internal controls that are being audited annually by the external auditors.
Great.
So,
Go ahead. Sorry.
excuse me, was the chair's question regarding the financial audit?
I was actually both, but mostly the financial audit.
Okay.
This process as well.
Yeah, because with the financial audit, if the controls are in place, then there's a little bit more credibility
Sure.
to the whole audit process.
Right.
Right.
And my question was really about, and it's probably just a lack of memory, I'll bet Kathy has told us this before, and when she does the annual, that there were no significant deficiencies, no weaknesses, but I just couldn't quite remember where does that happen in our process so that we're sure that that's being looked at and assessed. So thank you. Go right ahead.
Just a couple of points of clarification on these two topics. One, just for clarity's sake, the executive session that Commissioner Valdivia talks about is a meeting just with the commissioners and the chief auditor. I'm not present as staff, so that is an open place for any concerns between the internal audit and management can be expressed directly to the commissioners. I've also made it very clear to Robert that he's free to pick up the phone and call either Malene or Raul if he has any issues that come up. As for the CAFR and internal controls, I think we're at 14 years now without any findings of weaknesses in our controls or in our books.
That's wonderful.
So that is where the most rigor is applied to the financial controls. And Kathy gives me updates throughout the course of that audit so that if anything was coming up and the auditors were looking at something, we could bring that to the audit committee at that point in time.
Great.
So just a little bit more around the process.
Certainly didn't think it would be otherwise, just trying to check process and how it works here. So thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Anybody else on the, for the commissioner? Valdivia? Okay. Okay. Let's move to the director's report. Director Peck.
Thank you, Chair Sathoff. I'll start with some lottery news. First off with the toy drive. Every year, lottery employees step up big time to support the annual state employees toy drive. And 2018 was no different. Once again, the extreme generosity of lottery staff helped make this Christmas a bright one for children in need. We needed 2 lottery vans to deliver all the donated toys to the Capitol building. And I'd like to thank all lottery employees, especially the toy drive committee members, for making this present. I'm trying to making this a success. I'm trying to see if any are present here. But the toy drive committee members include Chuck Bauman, Brittany Goodwin, Rhonda Holland, Terry Laguerre, Crystal Smith, Elisa Zavala, who is here, Jenny Lopez, Jorge Cardenas, and Ann Todd. So moving on to the mobile app. The lottery mobile app has been available for both iPhone and Android users for a few months now. And I'm happy to report downloads are beating our initial expectations with very little marketing behind it, mostly all word of mouth. So far, more than 42,000 users have downloaded the app, and 81% of those users have scanned at least one ticket. Total scans to date are over 1.2 million. In addition, more than half of those users have signed up to receive email messages from Lottery. So great success there initially. Beyond offering our players increased convenience, the app is also providing increased opportunity for Lottery staff to directly support our customers, with helpline staff providing app support. It's a good learning experience for an organization that has historically worked through retail partners to support our customers. So now our hotline is directly interacting with players with the app. I had the pleasure earlier this week of introducing 4 recipients of $5,000 scholarships funded by the Lottery at the Scanner Newspaper's annual Martin Luther King Jr. Breakfast in Portland, of which we are a continuing platinum sponsor, and I just wanted to share a little bit about them. Pippa Cavill is a senior just down the road from the Scanner at Jefferson High School. Pippa is undecided and keeping our options open for where she will attend college. The one thing that she is certain about is her passion for volunteering. Pippa created the Jefferson High School Volunteer Club, where 40 students meet weekly to discuss local volunteer opportunities. And I will just say that at the breakfast, I noted that they had on one occasion raised over $15,000. Underrepresented students with science, technology, engineering, and math skills. She's leaning towards an English major, but unsure of where just yet. Jamie admires her parents for instilling kindness, a willingness to help others, and the constant desire to grow oneself. Gloria Joseph is attending University of Portland, majoring in both sociology and pre-med. Gloria will immediately tell you that she's very passionate about sports. In fact, her decision to major in pre-med came after a knee injury and has launched her into a larger goal to become an advocate for athletes and to help them prevent injuries as well. She still plays basketball, flag football, and loves to skateboard, but you can often find her volunteering at her old high school, De La Salle. And lastly, Jessica Isabor from Emory University in Atlanta. Jessica is also double majoring in pre-med and psychology, in addition to minoring in African studies. Her passion to help people is matched by her hunger to learn, hence her double major and minor. She wants to provide innovative healthcare to people who cannot afford it, while also learning more about global healthcare, specifically learning about more indigenous practices and how medical practitioners can learn from them. It was a great breakfast, and I just want to thank the team for helping us advance our promotional and sponsorship plans, where we are moving less away from having Lottery employees sitting at tables and more dollars going straight into scholarships and into the community. When I started here, these scholarships that Lottery was giving out were $1,500, and the governor turned to me at the first breakfast and said, I don't know what you're doing, but do more. And I said, yes, ma'am. And so we're very pleased to be offering $5,000 scholarships. And these are scholarships that the students can continue throughout their course of their studies through college if they keep their grades up and all of that. So really a wonderful time. Finally, I'm going to close with a couple of winner stories. Ann Mingus of Springfield won $3 million playing Mega Millions. She claimed her prize on January 10th after doing great winner's due diligence by consulting an attorney and financial planner prior to claiming her prize. This $3 million prize is the largest Mega Millions prize in Oregon's history since the game began offering in 2010. Mingus purchased the ticket at the Cottage Grove Safeway. She said she's going to take care of her family and retire with the money. 2 moms each win a second chance drawing. Amber Leahy from St. Helens said she couldn't believe it when she was notified by certified letter that she had won $25,000 playing the Lottery's second chance game. She won after entering her non-winning Railway Riches bingo ticket into the second chance drawing. And Nicole Williams of Eugene also won $25,000 playing the second chance game with the Mad Money crossword Scratch It, and said she uses the drawing to make sure her tickets are not winners. Amber used the prize for a great Christmas, and Nicole used it for a new gaming system for her son. That must be some gaming system. I don't know. Oh. Beats my Atari when I... So anyway. Sam Hawley of Portland won $118,000 playing Keno 8 Spot on He said he has used the same numbers for years and that he was glad he arrived early. And finally, Charles Washington of Portland won $5,000 playing Greatest Game in the West video lottery. He played the game at the Flipside Bar and Carts in Portland. Charles is putting the $5,000 towards a new home as he just sold his house. And the owner of Flipside celebrated with him and said it was a great experience. So, that is my report for this month.
Nice. Questions or comments from the commission for Director Pack? Okay, with that, let's move to the next item, the minutes. The minutes of the previous commission have been circulated to the commission in advance of this meeting. If there are no changes to the minutes, is there a motion to approve?
I move that the minutes of the Oregon State Lottery Commission meeting held on December 21st, 2018 be approved as final as presented today.
Do I have a,
Second.
got it. Moved up quickly. For the, will the clerk call the roll?
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Telfer?
Aye.
Commissioner Valdivia?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox?
Aye.
Chair Zappa?
Aye. Next item is the director's PERS contribution. The commission has received information about the director's compensation and in particular the PERS contribution to the compensation. I'd like to open this first for any questions or comments before I move to have a motion to approve.
A question. You know, our PERS system is a very complicated situation. And I know since 1946, employees have had to contribute to their PERS account. In the past, many employers, agencies, municipalities, et cetera, have picked up that 6% contribution. And the governor recently negotiated with the unions to have the employer or the employee to pick it up. In exchange for that, clarity to Oregonians as to who's paying the employee's PERS contribution, they were entitled to a 6.95% increase to cover the 6% and the additional payroll taxes that went along with that. So this is basically for unions. So my question first is, what other administrative personnel in lottery will this apply to?
I am not, I think, just.
I can answer if you like, Madam Chair. It's all employees.
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
employees in the
Okay.
state.
So then my comment is going to be nothing personal and nothing personal to individual employees of the lottery or of anywhere in the state of Oregon. But the problem with this lipstick approach is it does nothing to direct and solve the fundamental crisis of PERS in the state of Oregon today. It also, given the fact that it has nothing to do with solving the problem, it also has a compound effect, a negative effect, a costly effect, by increasing the base wage on employees that increases retirement in the future, increases time and a half, it increases a lot of the other payroll situations that we're going to find ourselves in. So in the long run, this is going to be a lot more costly than just and actually the 6% is merely shifting it from one bucket of money to another because the state's still paying the 6%, is just giving the employee the 6%. That extra 0.95% is to cover the payroll taxes, which include unemployment, Social Security, Medicare, et cetera. But there's a lot more compound negative, costly effect. So I'm going to be voting no. I just wanted to explain why, and that it is nothing personal against Director Pack.
So, Chris, thank you. And I guess the only thing I would authority nor our responsibility to try to fix that problem. I do think it is the responsibility of the legislature and the governor. And they have decided that all employers are going to get this increase. as compensation. So fundamentally, if we don't approve, we will be saying that Director Pack is the only employee in the state to not get this increase. And my view of that is that as a commission, if we believe he should get the increase, then that's the vote we should take. So with that, and I really do appreciate and respect your views on that, Chris, and the one commonality we have is that we believe that the PERS problem needs to be solved. So with that, I'm going to ask, unless I should, any other?
I
Go
have a
ahead.
question on that. It's just, I guess, a technical or procedural question, but now that it's being shifted to the employees, are employees required to make that contribution into PERS?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so basically, they're getting an increase, and then that's just being taken
It
out?
goes straight out of their
straight
check
out.
into their retirement account.
Mhm. Okay.
Any other discussion or questions? So with that, information regarding the director's compensation for the PERS contribution was circulated prior to today's meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I recommend approval for the lottery to implement the recommended compensation for the director per the attached spreadsheet effective February 1st, 2019.
Do I have a second?
A second?
Will the clerk call the roll?
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Telfer?
Nay.
Commissioner Valdivia?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox? Aye. Chair Stapa?
Aye. For the record, the motion has passed. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the appointment and salary of the Assistant Director of Security. This is good news. So, Director Pack, would you like to take it from here?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, I'm happy to report that we have, after an extensive recruitment process following Major Durbin's retirement nearly a year ago, we have found a strong candidate for the position of Assistant Director of Security. We've provided a contingent offer based on approval of the Commission and completion of background and reference checks. Security background has been completed, no issues. Employment references were checked, all glowing. So I am asking for your approval of appointing Darren Goodweiler as Assistant Director of Security for the lottery. You've seen his resume. He has an impressive background in law enforcement within the Secret Service and in private sector security, ethics, and compliance roles. He brings a really strong mix of law enforcement credentials with the understanding of the need for business agility and family and contributing to this great organization. So I'm happy to answer any questions. With your approval today, he will begin with the lottery on February 11th.
Questions or comments? Well, I know that this has been a diligent search for just the right fit. So I really appreciate, and the resume, I agree with the materials we got. He looks very impressive, and I'm looking forward to his first meeting so we can grill him.
I'll let him know.
Yeah. So with that, information regarding the recommendation for the AD of Security position was circulated prior to today's meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I move that the Oregon State Lottery Commission approve the director's recommendation to appoint Darren Goodweiler
Security consulting services to the public and private sectors clients for over 20 years. CNET has recently completed security reviews of the Florida Lottery, Wisconsin Lottery, and the Missouri Lottery. I am pleased to say their overall conclusion of the Oregon Lottery stated, the results of the work performed during this engagement indicate that the general security at the Oregon Lottery is very positive. Overall, the security of the lottery and the controls protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data appears to be working as intended. From lottery-specific areas, focus areas to IT security controls, the lottery is above average compared to other lotteries we have recently tested and other organizations in the gaming sector. This is a similar conclusion to our previous review. The total number of reported issues has been reduced from 15 identified in the previous security review to 7 in this review. No issues were identified that have any known impact on the accuracy, fairness, or integrity of past, current, or upcoming games. CNET did not identify any high-risk issues and noted only one medium risk. Do you have any questions?
Questions, comments?
Yes, I just need clarification.
Sure.
There we go. Clarification on the report that number 6 says specific issues. You mentioned there were 7 that were identified by the review, but there's several here. Are they
Okay, there's-
tied or not tied to?
There's 7 actual recommendations.
Right.
There is 7 issues, and then there is recommendations that they put in that we could do, but they only saw 7 that they identified as actual issues.
Okay,
Does that clarify what you were looking for?
Well, I understand there's a confidential report that's been issued to us. I know
Yes.
that. And I'm just wondering how this relates, if these specific issues relate to that, or issues have a different meaning here?
This is just the public as a generalization
Okay.
Yeah.
of the confidential, so they are related.
Okay.
Yeah, they're exactly the same. We're just saying that there are 7, and you guys got the full 7 and the details of the 7.
Perfect. Thank you.
Does that,
Yes.
okay.
In the materials that you provided today, my question has to do with just making it, dumbing it down so I understand it a little more, if I'm going to be plain. It looks to me like the issues, if I were to sum them up, appear to be, I think the phrase that was used was the internal control needed some improvement. And by that, you were referring to, I would call them mistakes or things made internally that would allow someone access into the system. Am I getting it right?
Right.
How do you-
So I discussed, most of these were technical issues, and I
Yeah.
discussed them with
So I didn't
IT
understand them.
security, with Shandy.
Mhm.
And they're not mistakes, they're all issues we knew about. There was no surprises in this report.
Right.
They're issues that are actually being addressed, a lot of it with the modernization. So it's nothing mistakes, and even my understanding of it is limited as well. But my understanding is, these are not, these are pretty fine splices.
Yeah,
Everything is fine, it could be better.
Right.
And by better, we're going from an A to an A+.
right.
So there's nothing, no open doors, nothing of that kind. It's just, there's always room for improvement. And that's what we paid for them for, is to find ways for us to improve.
Right. So it looked like you're just saying that, yeah, I didn't take this to mean that anything bad had happened. I took it to mean that, okay,
And we are working on that. IT is
Yeah.
on it.
the reason it was a question for me is because I think that most companies believe that they can do everything they can do on the technology side, and you can't prevent someone with malicious intent from doing things they shouldn't do. And I'm taking it that what we could do is improve our technology around that, but that's still going to be something that we have to always be vigilant about.
Yes, that's something we'll,
Okay.
continued vigilance, and
Yeah,
something we'll always work on.
okay, thank you. Anybody else, questions? Okay, thank you very much. With that, we will move to the financial report. Ms. Ortega.
Good morning, Chair Southoff, Director Pack, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Kathy Ortega, Chief Financial Officer for the Oregon Lottery, and we're here to take a look at the financial report for December, which is 6 months halfway through our fiscal year 19. And just a point of clarification, this report is comparing to the original budget. We have not included any mid-year budget adjustments in this because you need to approve them, and then you'll see them next month. So looking at the month of December, we have a net revenue of $92.2 million against a budget of $98.9 million, $6.7 million favorable variance, or unfavorable variance, excuse me. Net profit of 62.6 on a budget of 59.7, almost $9 million favorable variance, but there were no negative spending categories. Then flipping to the year-to-date for December, we had $550.3 million on a budget of $544.8, or $5.5 million favorable variance. No spending variances other than those associated directly with revenue. For a net profit of $349.8 on a budget of $317.7, or $32.1 million favorable variance. Turning to the next page, it's the schedule of services and supplies. I've talked about our retailer recovery variance that has been occurring throughout the year, and we do have an entry in the mid-year to fix that. I have the balance sheet there for you as of December 31st. And because we're at the end of a quarter, I also have the capital spending report. On an original budget of $19.5 million, we've spent roughly $5.8 million, with about $16 million to go. And there will be some changes to this through the mid-year process as well. I'd be happy to entertain any questions on the financial report.
Questions or comments from the commission on the financials? Hearing none. I have one question on the capital, it's not
Of
about
course.
the financials, the monthly. Should we do that before we approve, or?
Sure.
Okay. Just, it's a real basic question. I know we're sort of early, no, not really early in the year, we're about the half-year point. Do you think we're on target on our capital spend? It seems like we're a little low.
We are a little low, and I'll go into that in further detail on the mid-year, because we're going to pull
Great.
some of that out.
That's what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So with that, is there a motion to approve the monthly financial statements?
I move that the Oregon State Lottery financial statements for the month ended December 31st, 2018 be approved for the record as presented today.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Will the clerk call the roll?
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Telfer?
Aye.
Commissioner Valdivia?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox?
Aye.
Chair Sandhoff?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kathy.
The next item, we plan to do what is not going to be done, where we may have made a mistake, under budgeted, over budgeted, taking all of that into consideration and resubmitting our numbers, resubmitting the lottery's numbers, which we roll up. The end result of that is a reduction to spending overall, which includes capital and expense, of about $18.8 million. The primary drivers for that I've highlighted for you in the memo, and it comes from some changes in the spend on our VLT programs. And primarily, there are two sources of that. And just to pause to say, I think that this is a good thing, because it represents the environment that we're trying to create, where we test things before we make large purchases. And if you recall, we engaged in the Wonder Woman test, and that ended up resulting in not going forward with the precisions on VLTs. And so that money that came from what we were thinking was going to be the spend is what's driving a lot of this savings. Now, we're continuing with that process, and there is a spreadsheet here to kind of outline our updated VLT program plans. And I'm hoping you got the bigger version of the eye chart, because even I can't read this one. But basically, just to clarify something for you and for the record, we called what we were going to be doing annual procurements. And that was probably not a good choice of nomenclature, because there's no conceivable way we can contract for a test, conduct a 6-month test, make a purchase decision, contract for a purchase, and deploy within a year. It's just not physically possible. So what we've done to clarify is provide this chart for you to see where we are. And the money that has come from the Wonder Woman is really going to be pulled forward and used in the next edition of the testing. And so I think because we are trying to make smart decisions by testing, you want to see more of this. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing because we're trying to make informed, data-driven decisions. So in addition to that, there are some significant reductions in spending in the areas of advertising, public information, and promotional efforts that are representing more cost-efficient strategies. So those are permanent savings, or I should say savings that should reoccur. So
6 years, but, so I stepped into Bill's office, and, you know, has anybody been in to have a picture taken recently? I mean, it's pretty pathetic in there. And I told Bill, I said, well, we're rebalancing the budget this morning. Maybe we can find a few dollars to get rid of some of the Scotch tape that's on things and things like that. So just a comment, since we're saving $18 million here, maybe we can find
I'm sure
a few dollars
between the
to-
mid-year and next year's budget, we'll get that all figured out.
All right, great. Thank
Did
you.
Bill put you up to this?
No,
Yeah.
no, Bill did not put me up to this. It's my idea.
I think that I have noticed the lottery does a really nice job of working as lean as possible for as long as possible. So I will say, I appreciate that. I also want to tell you that I've spent a lot of time looking at this. I am usually the one saying, spend the capital, we need to grow. But I will tell you that I'm totally supportive of the decisions making here. These were data-driven decisions. You're not spending money because you have data that tells you it was not the right way to do this. It also appears to me that we've had presentations in the past on your marketing and your advertising, and your shift in how you're thinking about that, I think, has generated these savings. And so I really commend all of you for the $18 million you're saving. So appreciate that. I guess you need a motion, don't you?
I do. I would like to have approval for
Yeah.
a change to the budget for the mid-year activity.
Is there a motion to approve the fiscal year 19 mid-year balance, budget rebalance, excuse me?
I move that the Oregon State Lottery Commission approve the changes to the fiscal year 19 budget as presented in the fiscal year 19 mid-year budget rebalance memorandum presented today.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Will the clerk call the roll?
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Telfer?
Aye.
Commissioner Valdez?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox?
Aye.
Chair Satthoff?
Aye. For the
Thank
record, the
you.
motion's passed.
So
Thank
just
you.
one other thing that I probably should have included in the financial report. I had made a commitment to report to you quarterly on how we're spending the $75 million. There has not been much change since the last time I reported to you. We've spent about $1.6 million, and the components are basically the same as they were last time, with the largest being the Gartner consulting agreement. I think you're probably going to see some of that spending happen in the remaining months of the year, and we'll be looking at this as we go into 20 as to how all of these things are getting prioritized and how the spend will go.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other questions for Kathy? Okay? Okay. So shall we start with Chris, our legislative update? Is that where you want to do? Okay. Chris Scarrow.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Director Pack. For the record, my name is Chris Scarrow, and I'm your brand-new Rules and Policy Analyst, replacing Aaron Seiler, who is sorely missed. Thank you for having me here today. As you know, the legislature convened on Tuesday of this week, so I've been reading lots of bills this week, and I wanted to give you an overview of the bills I think we should track for possible impact to lottery. So the first category of bills that, well, you should know about this one, it's Senate Bill 74, and it's our modernization bill. And I won't go into the details. I think Matt and Barry have briefed you on what's in the bill. but it's already got some momentum. It's assigned to Senate Business and General Government, and we're hoping to have a hearing February 7th. And Director Pack and I will meet with the chair of that committee next week. So it's chaired by Chuck Riley, and the members are Dembro, Olson, Hass, and Gerard. And we'll meet with them hopefully before the hearing and answer any questions. We still have some details to work out with Legislative Council on the language, but it is looking in good shape, and we hope to move it quickly. At least that's the plan.
Any issues that Ledge Council has raised at this point, or are they just in the beginning of their process?
No, Ledge Council is happy with the bill. We found some just cleanup that we wanted, so it's just a matter of them finding the time to do it before the hearing.
Thank you.
So then we have some bills that are specifically targeted to Oregon Lottery. So far, there's just two that I'm aware of. So Senator Gelser has a bill that you probably heard about that directs how we handle when winnings go unclaimed because of technical errors. She was open to some amendment language to improve the bill, so we're waiting to see that. The next bill I have not seen yet, but we hear it's coming. It's Representative Barker's bill that would say that winners remain anonymous unless they affirmatively disclose their name and city of residence. And secondly, that lottery can pay prizes directly to trusts. So we're working internally to make sure that we'd be prepared to comply with something like that if it did pass. And so we need to be able to write a check to a trust and do all the upgrades that we might need to do. So we're just working on that, so we're prepared to answer questions.
Chris, can I ask you a question on
Sure.
that one?
Yeah.
The tickets are payable to the bearer.
Right.
So if somebody buys a ticket, trusts don't buy tickets necessarily. How's that working? Are we talking grantor trusts, or what kind of trusts are we talking about?
So those are great questions. Like I said, we haven't seen the language yet, and we just have a lot of questions. So we've talked to DOJ, and they're sort of confused how it would fit with our current understanding of, as you said, individuals are the holders of those instruments. So how do we pay a trust? And we need to do garnishment checks. We need to withhold taxes. We need to make sure the beneficiary is 18. Things like that. So we have a lot of questions, too.
Do you know what's driving Rep. Barker to do that?
So he was requested by a lobby group to draft it.
I think, if I can,
Do you want to-
Commissioner Tolper, I think there's some legitimate concern out there about publicity around large winners and their personal safety and privacy. States handle this differently. Other lotteries allow for confidentiality. Some do not. Our laws require that they be made public as public record if requested. We ask players if we can publicize, and they.
Oh, okay.
But as Chris says, we haven't seen the language yet, so we're not entirely sure how it fits in with the rest of our.
Yeah,
statutes.
because I know, we had that anonymous issue with a winner, foreign, and that was a safety for his
Right.
family issue. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. It's more the trust. I mean, just trying to see how it works.
Right.
I think we'll be able to report more to you next month when we've seen language and had some discussions around the bill.
And just as a reminder for me, is part of the issue that our statutes require a natural person because a trust is legally a person under the law. So it said our language says and only a natural person. Is that correct?
So that's
Something
been
like
that's been our internal policy
I see.
and legal advice, and so this would change the statute. So the statute would direct us to interpret that differently.
So who within lottery deals with that issue?
So Kathy Ortega and Player Services folks have been helping determine how the logistics would play out in terms of, can we even issue a check payable to a trust? You know, who do we garnish if things like that. So they've been very helpful in figuring out if the legislature thinks this is the right policy choice, could we implement it? So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Interesting
Thank
to see
you.
how it works out.
Yeah. Okay, the next bucket of bills are the usual ones that try to redirect either our revenue or grant additional bonding authority. So you'll see here, back to our discussion about PERS, there's a bill that would direct our sports betting revenue into the PERS unfunded liability. Rep. Lively has a bill that he's had in previous sessions that would return to the 2.5% allocation to counties, which I believe the legislature has suspended for a few biennia. And then lots of miscellaneous spending bills that should say levy improvements, foster youth programs, seismic upgrades, bike paths, port development, the usual array of projects for.
This is going to be an interesting session with this
Right,
one.
right. Yeah, we already made the paper with the first one, so.
So, yeah, since the revenue enhancement was to increase the size of the pie, not to just raise more money for other things. But the question I have is, having been a legislator,
Yes.
are we proactive on that, or do we sit and wait for the legislature to contact us and say, come explain? Or are we more proactive in saying, you know, we have some issues here, and then we go in and look at the sponsor of the bill, talk to the sponsor of the bill?
So I would say largely we're reactive in the sense of, I assume when both of those bills, if and when they're scheduled, committee staff would try to reach out and ask us what we think about this bill. As a state agency, we can't necessarily advocate a
No,
position
I'm
on-
not telling
Right.
us to advocate. It's just that there's some
Reach out
glitches
and-
in
yeah.
some of these things that cause, you know, some heartburn.
If there are glitches and heartburn, we definitely reach out.
Yeah.
Okay,
We are silent on the expenditure bills,
got it.
right? We have no say in how the money
Right.
goes. That's their choice.
I think a good example in the Lively bill in the previous session, we didn't necessarily have a position, but I believe my understanding is Aaron and Barry offered language that was sort of work with what we needed it to do, to just let them know logistically what we need the bill to say. So I think we're active in that regard.
And if I may, just another good example of that, being proactive, is when Aaron and Barry and myself met with Senator Gelser when we first kind of heard about her proposal. It was just a concept at that point, but working with her to kind of really get at the root of, you know, what's the policy or what's the challenge that you're really trying to thing that you're trying to fix, and propose some new language. So I think in cases where we kind of hear about stuff and have some and can offer some clarity or provide maybe some information that would allow a legislature to have a little bit more informed kind of worldview of what you know is actually happening. We try to take those opportunities when we can.
So given the fact that you have had a conversation with Senator Gelser, you feel she has better understanding as to what caused that and how it may not happen in the future?
Yeah, we're confident.
But she's still going forward with the bill?
She is, but she's also, I think, expressed, you know, she was happy that we came and explained to her kind of from our side what that process was. I think oftentimes if you have a news report to go on, you know, obviously there's all sorts of different perspectives. And so to kind of get lottery's perspective firsthand around a particular incident, I think is a valuable thing.
And Commissioner Telfer, I might just remind you that when you're a legislator, the solution to every problem is bill.
Well, of course. That's what we're there to do, is legislate.
Even PERS, we can solve PERS.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Director Pack, you mentioned that we're silent on expenditure bills. That applies to that first one?
Yep.
So basically,
Well-
our team, when we say proactive, we're talking about our team here and yourself in speaking into these situations, but we can't speak into this situation right here.
Right, we wouldn't take a position as to whether or not lottery proceeds should be sent to the PERS unfunded liability. What we would do was help the legislature understand how much revenue is expected to be generated
Sure.
from sports betting so they can evaluate whether that's a policy decision they want to make.
Okay, because I would just be concerned in now going back to the reasons and getting into sports betting and funneling 80% of that over to the PERS. And I don't know where that discussion would happen, but that would be my first thought.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the final category of bills, it's the largest bucket, and on their face, these appear to have nothing to do with us, but of course, if they pass, they would have a big impact on our operations here. So we have the typical limitations on agency rulemaking that you see every year that would make my job difficult, but public records requirements that made Matt's job difficult. Ethics reporting, a lot of state employee HR requirements, lots of public procurement, which although we're generally exempt, we generally follow the standard practices. And then there were a few bills about the Oregon Racing Commission, their purview of things they can do that we'll just be tracking for interest, not for any impact on us necessarily.
Who's opening
but-
up the public records law, and do we know what the core of that is? Are they trying to add or get people out from under some of that, or do we know what's going on there?
So those two I cited are, so they're increased transparency. So I don't know the sponsors off the top of my head, but
Create more.
right. So one of them would require us to report annually or something about the number of requests we received, the number we denied, the number we didn't respond to, things like that. So they're increased transparency, not decreased.
Probably no opportunity to get any exemptions in there.
Right.
No, it's quite the opposite.
Right.
You know, and
I
for
figured,
just
but I thought,
yeah,
well, can always
and just
hope.
for us, I think that one specifically, if it were to pass, and I mean, again, I haven't really tracked it super close, but I just wouldn't be surprised. It would not be difficult for lottery to comply with that one. We track our public records requests really through a single source. So to print out an annual report of what came in, what went out, and how long they took would be pretty easy for some of the larger agencies, I think, out there. I think, you know, DHS, for example, where you've got multiple different people kind of tracking those types of requests. It's a bigger ask, but for us, that would be actually pretty easy.
That's good to know.
So is your bill tracking limited to just online bill tracking through the legislative's website?
Yeah, well, DAS has a system that agencies can use so we can enter the bills that we want to track, and then every morning it kind of tells me where they are, and then I just...
But it just says whether it's first reading, it's in committee, it's had a,
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. It's been moved to another committee. Okay, but nothing about the internal conversations.
The internal legislative conversations? Right. No. So,
And you don't sit and watch it on TV in the afternoon to watch how the bill's being?
well, I do. I mean, it is. I love it.
Oh, I loved it too,
Yeah,
yeah.
TV shows to watch,
Yeah.
right.
I do that, and you'd be surprised where lottery pops up. You never know when they'll come into a hearing. So I'm paying attention, and I hope to be there, and I hope people get to know me, and so that I have an ear to what's going on, so that I'm aware of some of the stuff that we're going to be concerned about or want to be aware of.
So you spend
so.
time in the gauntlet, in the hallway there in front of the-
Yeah, Barry sent me over already on the first day of session.
You gotta get a hook.
I'm a
so
mean
you can-
boss.
I know.
Yeah. It's always just walk them to the elevator.
Right.
Say, can I walk with you?
Does that work? Isn't that annoying? I'll have to ask you for strategies. Yeah, so I mean, I hope to have a little more sense of where things are at and what's moving and what, a lot of these are not going to go anywhere, and, you'll get a sense of what's moving. So I'll be able to give you better updates as we get into session.
Thank you.
So yeah, and that's, like I said, the focus is going to be our bill, which will be, most of our time will be spent on making sure that that gets through both chambers. And then we have really, so far, I mean, we've had a lot of requests just even in the first week for fiscal information and all of that, so that's coming pretty regularly. So that's what I'll be working on. As far as rules, Erin wrapped up all her rulemaking, of course, before she left, so that's kind of, it's on hold, but we can always adopt rules if we need to for emergent issues. But this is where we'll be focusing. So any questions about that?
Questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How about we'll move to the 2018 impacts report. Stacy?
Good morning, Commissioners, Director Pack. I am Stacy Shaw, Senior Manager, Product Marketing, and I do know how to use a clicker, but I want to go back one. Some of you on the Commission will likely remember that about 2 years ago, we adopted a revision to our Responsible Gambling Code of Practice. There were a lot of little things that we changed, but the main thing was to make sure that we held ourselves more publicly accountable and that we were regularly reporting and getting feedback from a variety of sources, not just from ourselves. So last year, we produced our first inaugural impacts report, and I'm here today to take you through our second one. And what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about what we're going to do with what we've learned versus just what we did. I just want to remind everyone that while we have probably hundreds of tactics and strategies, we have two very, very simple goals that we keep in mind when we are executing our responsible gambling program. They're very simple but complex to do, but we are here to provide information and tools to make sure that anybody that plays a lottery game understands what they're doing and that they can enjoy the games in a responsible way. And then also it is our commitment to make sure that anybody who has any type of issue with gambling knows how to access help and that they understand that it's free, confidential, and that it works. So what we measure, we have things that we look at annually that give us trends so that we can foster continuous improvement. And hopefully every year we'll have some key accomplishments that we did specific to that year that isn't something that is reoccurring. So I'm going to take you through some of that. So here's some of the outputs. Here's some of the numbers, but they're, I think, interesting. But I'm going to dig into what we learned about them and what we're going to do. But historically, to this point, lottery funds have generated close to $100 million dedicated to problem gambling services. Last year, we trained over 2,500 staff members of our convenience and grocery retailers in responsible gambling practices. We launched a new app, and there were 7 tips on that app about how to gamble responsibly. It's really important that because people come in and out of gambling issues, that when they're ready, they know what to do. And so for that reason, we make sure that the average Oregonian will see a responsible gambling treatment referral ad 11 times during a 26-week period. It's important that we're there when they're ready. Last year, we invested about $3.8 million in player education and treatment referral. We generated over 2 million, well over 2 million page views to the Problem Gambling Resource website, and we gave some advanced training to our folks who have regular and ongoing interaction with the public and with retailers. But those are just numbers. So, yes.
Can you hold a second?
Sure.
I went through your whole report. I want to tell you it's an excellent report. I have just a couple of questions.
Sure.
And I think it's in here and I missed it.
Okay.
But on the $3.8 million that you invested,
Yeah.
I know that over time we have obviously increased our funding for this entire program. But over year from our last fiscal year to this, is that an increase, the $3.8 million itself? It felt like it was a decent increase, but I'm just trying to remember.
It's actually a relatively flat increase, but it just
Okay.
depends on where we put it,
I
because
see.
sometimes some of it goes into a big bucket into research, and sometimes a big bucket goes into training.
Okay.
Like with everything else we're doing, though, we're trying very hard to make sure we're spending where spending has the highest impact,
Right.
and not just spending to spend. And you're going to see some movement over the course of the coming year.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So one of the biggest measures that we have in keeping with our goal is to figure out how many people are aware that there is problem gambling treatment available. And this year, we're really at an all-time high. On its face, that's pretty impressive, and a pretty impressive jump since last year. Almost 91% of current players know that, and that's great. We want everybody who plays to know. And a really high percentage of non-players as well. But if you peel this back a little bit, one of the biggest things that keeps people from seeking treatment is a financial concern. If you have a gambling issue, it's quite likely that you have issues with money. And we really believed that we always say treatment is free, it's confidential, and it works. And we really believe that everybody knew that. And we peeled it apart this year, and we measured the features that we advertised to see if people were hearing us. And we were really kind of stunned to see that only 48% of the people knew that it was free. We thought we were doing a great job. It's in everything. And what we're learning, and one of the things with all marketing, is messaging and resonance and emotional connection. And really, we could be saying that people aren't hearing us for some reason. A lot of people aren't hearing us. So what we're working on really now is a more natural way to say it, that isn't becoming wallpaper, it isn't part of a terms and conditions. And what I want to show you, we have a movie today, Chris, so I know how you like that. I want to show you a new campaign that we've done for promoting the availability of treatment. And you'll see how we really emphasize free in a very natural and organic way. But even more importantly, I want to talk about how we developed these spots. We quite often will do message testing to make sure that we're talking to people in a way that they can hear us. This is a very specific group of people that we really want to connect with. And what we did was we worked with our partners at OHA, and they reached out to treatment providers and had people in treatment actually give us the language, the actual words you're going to see in this spot. Not only did we save money on message testing, but we have a fairly high degree of certainty that this should resonate with the people that we're trying to connect with. And so I'm going to ask Taylor to run the first one for you.
When I was gambling, I felt broke and broken. Getting help was the best thing I've ever done, and it was free. today I am
hopeful. And today I'm getting my life back because I got help.
So we call this campaign Trilogy, and it's based on the story that people in recovery tell people who are still in their addiction about what was it like while you were in whatever your addiction was, why did you seek help, and what's your life like today after treatment. So the next one is one from the point of view of significant other.
When my partner was gambling, I felt ashamed. I got help when I didn't know what else to do, and it was free. Today, I am grateful. My partner's problem was my problem until I got help for myself.
So I think these are pretty powerful, and they will start running in about a week, and we have them in Spanish for both the gambler and the significant other. So we're really pleased, and I think the partnership with the people at OHA has been really shows here in this work. And I think that this does a much better job of talking about how it's free than saying it's free, confidential, and it works. So we'll see, though. We'll get some data, and we'll let you know. We also measure awareness of the advertising we do on gaming responsibly. This story is not quite as bright. I think you've probably heard me say that responsible gambling is for all players all the time. So if that's the case, we want people to know what that means, all people who play. And we're relatively flat year over year in terms of the awareness. They're decent numbers, but we would ideally want current players to be at 100%. If they're playing, they should know. And what is not great here is that we spent a bit more on the responsible gambling part of the messaging this year. So we dug into it a little bit more. And one of the things that I think we do fairly well is communicate the limit setting on time and budget. But again, in terms of people being able to hear you, I think that for people, every gambler doesn't think that applies to them. That's for people who have a problem. That's for people who spend too much. So they're not listening. What we've been trying to do is put out information in our marketing and integrate it into everything about how the games really work, what the odds are, the concept of randomness. And we just started doing that. So you can see at the very end there, we didn't measure it last year because we weren't including that message in our work, but we're working very hard because we feel that's something every gambler can hear, whether or not they think they have any issues. So this is clearly, we started doing it. The numbers are super low. We have a lot of work, but we think that's a path, and we're going to continue to research that so that all players know what they're playing. We do quite a lot, and typically Director Pack will report on how many hits we drive to the website. We do quite a lot of, we've moved a lot of our work into digital. We do a lot of digital advertising to get people to the Oregon Problem Gambling Resource website. What you'll see here is that throughout the year we had modest gains. We do what is called optimizing our results all the time. We're testing, we're running the things that get more clicks. But then we started to see a flattening and a drop, and I think, Chair Sathoff, you've commented on that in a couple of the meetings. What we did here was not just optimization. We realized that the work we had out there had become wallpaper. It had been out too long. We did a major refresh. We did some research around messaging, and we launched that new creative where you see there in May. So that is not a sustainable increase, but it's something that we have to do on a regular basis. What this chart doesn't tell you, however, is that when people get to the website, a lot of them aren't staying very long. So we had worked with the Oregon Health Authority to put up that website you see on the left several years ago, and we did some analytics on it to see what people were clicking to, what they weren't clicking to, and we're in the process. We should go live next month with a refresh on the website that makes the things people are looking at first or longest more prominent, and generally refreshes it and gives it some more content. So the lessons we're learning from that, we're applying to the website as well. So all the work is essentially to help people that need to connect to treatment. So people contacting the helpline, we saw like a 20% increase in calls, and everything else is either down or flat. We did some focus groups about a year and a half ago that told us that one of the impediments, aside from the concern about money, to seeking treatment is that people have no idea what's going to happen. They don't know what happens when they pick up the phone. They don't know if are they in group. How does it work? And it's intimidating. So we also learned that when people are doing research now about this, a lot of them use YouTube. So we did a series of videos, testimonials, and or almost tutorials about what to expect when you pick up the phone. They're long form. I'm not going to show them all to you, but I'm going to show you about 30 seconds of one of them that we did.
Stacy, before you do that, something you said, does it, I don't know if I misunderstood, but are people not wanting to contact the helpline because they're worried that the contact will be more public with a group, or do they want more one-on-one contact? Because some of these look like they would have direct one-on-one contact.
Yeah, well, most of the treatment through the providers is actually one-on-one.
Right.
Some people like group, some people are intimidated by group, but that hasn't really been a reason. I didn't mean to imply. I think they just want to know when they call, what are my choices, what are my options, and you can get group, you can actually even get, text help. There's a number of things, the way you can do it, and people don't know that. So we're trying to make that, when they're researching, give them that option.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Problem Gambling Helpline. How may I help you?
Hi, I got your number from a friend.
Okay, well, I definitely can help. My name is Maggie. What is yours?
Our main goal is to connect either the problem gambler or someone affected by gambling to a provider in their community so that they can take the steps to start going to counseling and receive the treatment necessary for recovery.
And there's a variety of them. In fact, I don't know if Kitty is still here. Kitty is in one of them, and we've done a series of them, and they're available on YouTube so people can, really understand what might happen. So I'd like to move to things that I believe are key accomplishments for us in this in 2018. You might recall that in 2017 we spent a lot of effort on training our video lottery retailers, feeling like that was the first place to start, much bigger impact. But our convenience and grocery retailers are what we call traditional. They have an impact too, and they have issues too. But we learned a lot from doing the training for the video lottery retailers. That training was 32 minutes long, and it was not mobile enabled. I don't think you need an in-depth research study to tell you that probably wasn't great. So this training was 12 minutes long and all mobile. And also we worked with our retail partners, Jackson's is one of the bigger ones, and also Safeway Albertsons, to help develop this training so that it really was targeted to the issues that the convenience and grocery retailer staff face. So we had pretty good results. We had over 2,500 of them trained, staff trained, and that represents 1.7 per retailer. And so you'll see here in the circle, like this was a survey we did to retailers after the training, and there are really great numbers there about knowing where to find information and understanding the role. But the not great news is only 112 of retailers out of 2,500 and change completed the survey. So our learning here is going back after the fact is very difficult. So we're doing new video lottery retailer training very soon, and we're building some pre-training questions in the front of it and some post-training questions at the end of it. That way, everybody will give us some data on how effective the training was, rather than having to go back and do a survey.
So was this survey done right at the end of the 12-minute, or was it done disjointed from
It was like a survey monkey that was sent out independently, separately.
That's a problem.
Yeah. So we really want to know more than what 100 people tell us.
And
Nice,
people doing the
nice
training
directional.
Are not, you give them a couple questions at the end of the training that's only 12 minutes, I think they're going to be much more likely to
Right.
answer those questions and move on.
Right.
You give me a day and send it, I'm going to lose track. And
Right.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So one of the things we do on an ongoing basis is to provide additional training for our staff who have heavy retailer and player interaction. Last year, our focus was on the people in player service, who see a lot of people every day, and our field service staff. So we trained 126 people, and we had 6 two-hour sessions. We had Janine Robinson, who we've talked about before. She's an industry expert in training in responsible gambling. She came in and spent 2 hours with the teams, and there were some follow-up things that came after it. The training was really well received, but I think our biggest learning is it has to be ongoing. People don't remember it. They have new situations they encounter. Things evolve. So we're very pleased with the work we did, but one of the things we're going to introduce in the coming year is on-demand webinars, for situation-based on-demand webinars, so we don't have to wait to have a 2-hour training session and people can use them, and we will work with our staff to really model the situations they actually deal with on a regular basis. So continuous improvement, that's what we are all after here. So I did this presentation about 2 weeks ago. My numbers on app users are way off. 2 weeks is a lifetime in our app. But one of the things that we accomplished was RG was integrated into our app on day one. It wasn't an ad. It wasn't an afterthought. There were several things. We have, Katie Martz spoke this morning about, I tried to replicate what I would spend if I played fast and I played for an hour. We have a cost to play calculator on there, so you can plug in how much you play, how long you're going to play, and your speed of play, so you can understand what the impact might be. We have a budget and timing tracker. We have tips, and if you complete the tips, we gamified that and you can earn a badge. So, but if you'll see in the big giant phone in the middle, back when we only had 33,000 users, only 0.8% had viewed one or more RG tips. Only 0.5 had completed the RG tips. And only 201 had set up a monthly budget. The median monthly budget is $50, which is interesting. Honestly, at this point, I was not terribly surprised by the numbers. I think that we haven't really created a lot of reasons for people to use it. So we're going to start promoting it and then creating reasons for people to use it. On the left, you'll see that in video lottery establishments and our bars and restaurants, we're going to have coasters that encourage people to download the app and track the money you play, and that's in real time in real situation. So that we'll be interested to see how that helps. And we also include it when we send out a newsletter email about the app. In this case, we're promoting earn your badge by taking the RG tips. What we have to do moving forward is spend some time creating reasons that people want to use it. So we're going to be working on that. But I think the important takeaway for this year is that it's integrated. It isn't an afterthought.
Stacy, if you go back a few slides, you don't need to, but you were commenting on the recall, understanding the odds, understanding how the game works are very low.
Right.
Do you see this app and the tips we put on that as assisting with that?
Absolutely. A lot of the tips are about
Right.
things like the concept of randomness and bonus chasing and things like that. And I will say they were low because it wasn't really the focus of our communication. Our focus has always been set a time limit, stick to a budget. And I think through research we've uncovered that maybe that isn't something everybody thinks is applicable to them. They don't have an issue. So in the very beginning, I said that we had updated the code to make ourselves more accountable. And all of these things that I'm reporting to you now were things that we've done through our own research and our own reporting and monitoring of ourselves. But we did also commit to seeking validation and input from outside resources. So I'm sure that we've talked in the past that we were applying for the World Lottery Association Level 4 Responsible Gambling Certification. Catchy title. And I am more than pleased to announce that we got it. So let me tell you a little bit about what it is and why we think it's important. So Level 4 recognizes lotteries who have embedded RG into their organizational goals, their governance, their management process, and who have made RG a key component of the corporate culture. I just have to say this first bullet just because I have to. It was a 130-page submission with 227 links to documentation and assets. It was validated by Gaming Laboratories International Auditor, who came in twice and spent a week each time. They interviewed staff, they interviewed our retailers, they interviewed our colleagues at the Oregon Health Authority and other places. So it was a very thorough, in-depth audit. The work was judged by an international panel for the WLA's Responsible Gambling Framework. Level 4 is the highest level you can get, and we're the only U.S. lottery that has video lottery in their portfolio to achieve this certification, and we're one of only 8 U.S. lotteries to achieve it in total. So I think it's really important to include that in a discussion of a year because the whole point behind this is continuous improvement. And so we now, in 3 years, we'll have to go back and prove that we've continued to improve, and that's our whole goal. So that is it for me today.
As a lottery commissioner, I'd like to congratulate you on that hard work and the accomplishment, and I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody else, and I'm sure the lottery, Oregon State Lottery, has recognized those efforts, and congratulations to the whole team.
Yeah, teamwork makes the dream work.
That made that happen.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm not surprised because since I've joined the lottery, I think we are always leading the pack on these issues, and I'm just really, really proud of this, you and this whole organization. Those last 2 bullets are unbelievably impressive.
Yep. Thank you very much. We're all very proud, and it was a huge group effort.
Thank you, Stacy. Okay, Matt.
Chair Sathoff, Director Pack, Commissioners, for the record, I'm Matt Shelby, your Public Information Manager. I'm going to walk you through a little bit about our latest snapshot. We just wrapped up the 2018 calendar year, and the audit numbers came back recently for our 2018 fiscal year, so here we are with another snapshot. Last year, about this time, we were over in Bend, and I was new to the lottery and got on this project late, and really all I did was kind of walk you through page by page what the snapshot was. At that time, Commissioner Telfer asked some really good questions. I'm going to paraphrase here, but I think essentially is, what's the goal, who's the audience, why, what's the value here, which I think are really good questions. And so today, I'm going to do something a little bit different than last year. Instead of walking you through page by page, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about kind of what our goal is, how we used the snapshot last year, and kind of what's different this year about it, and what we're going to do moving forward. And feel free to chime in with questions as I kind of roll through this. So essentially, what's the point, right? And it's really kind of 4 main goals, I think, that we have. First being, really developing a shareable version of the lottery story. This is just an example of one of the pages. I'm not going to read you the text there. It's kind of small. But that chart at the bottom kind of gives anyone at a quick glance really a history of beneficiaries when they came on board, win game offerings, and then behind all that, total transfers to the state. One of the things that I've learned in the little over a year I've been here, there's lots of misinformation out there around lottery, from when games started, why lottery first was established, who decides where the money goes, all that kind of stuff. And so what the snapshot does is really give anybody a tool to kind of share some of those really kind of key foundational points about lottery and a little bit about our history. Another thing that it does is it provides easy access to some of our highest demand data. These numbers before we started producing Snapshot are all available in our CAFR. But again, I think this is a little more user-friendly version. We're pulling it straight from there and really just putting it in an easier-to-read format. Some of the things that we really get asked for more often than not, transfers to the state, how much are you actually bringing in? Is it really true that 91.2% of the money play goes back in prizes? Yes, it's true. Really finding out where all the rest of the money goes. So, and again, a lot of utility here. I actually have a copy of it on my desk and reference it on a fairly regular basis when you get the random reporter call or constituent or player that just has some kind of pretty high-level questions. So it's proven to be a pretty useful tool.
Yeah, I think this slide is particularly useful. I think all of us here kind of know the numbers back and forth and what we do, but just reading it, even me, I sat and thought, yeah, that's right. We are your bullet on the second largest discretionary funding source behind personal income taxes hit me even when I thought, well, I knew that, but seeing it like this is pretty impactful.
Do you mean you have the full CAFR on your desk?
I have that too, but this is a lot easier to flip through.
Constantly.
Yes. The other thing we try to do, the other goal is really to highlight relevant impacts from the previous year. So whether those are projects that were funded, major winners, or stories about our retailers. And really this is just we call it a snapshot. It's not the full menu, but really just highlighting some of the noteworthy things that are happening, really the kind of good things that are coming out of lottery in a kind of, again, pretty easy to capture format. And then really this kind of falls into the no surprises bucket and us being transparent about where we want to go, previewing the projects for the coming year. And really, as you can see here, we're tracking not just fiscal year, but also calendar year 2018. So mobile app, we launched that this fall in this current year, or fiscal year. But again, even signaling that, fall 2018 or fall 2019, we're going to look, we're actively looking at a return to sports betting. So really being transparent about kind of where we're going. We used, last year was the first year we had it. And actually, it proved to have a fair amount of utility. And so I just kind of wanted to quickly walk you through some of the kind of use cases or places we used it in the last year. Legislative engagement was a big one. As we started to meet with legislative leadership to talk about our legislative concept and our upcoming bill, again, I'll go back to that, a lot of misinformation or just a lack of understanding in general around some of those foundational kind of lottery issues. And so it was really nice to have that as kind of a leave behind, again, much easier to read than some of the kind of the required stuff that we have to do. And for a lot of folks, even if for the folks who aren't leaders, legislative leadership, but even just new legislators would have questions. I'm seeing questions about lottery bonds, or people are asking me about where lottery money goes. Can you give me a basic understanding? And it was a good complementary piece to have in some of those conversations. Similar to the legislative engagement, this was actually a really good tool to share with media. As you guys know, the media world changes pretty quickly. We've got reporters, new beat reporters kind of cycling in and out. Seems like don't know if state government is the short straw in the newsroom, but they keep changing, and so you get a new person, kind of a cub reporter coming in that doesn't, again, have that full understanding, or maybe they've got a partial understanding of some of the history. It's a good resource for them just to have on the front end, so that as other stuff comes around across their desk, they've got some context. It was really good actually to have some of those numbers and those charts when we were getting questions about sports betting. Nationally, you hear a lot of numbers thrown around that are really pretty high. We've talked about this before, that it's actually a pretty low margin. And so to kind of, the snapshot helped us put that into perspective a little bit when we were talking with some reporters. And then community engagement. And I talked at the beginning that this document had a lot of utility, and it does, because one of the things that we do is we actually end up pulling those charts out and using them, not just in the snapshot document itself, but they would end up in countless PowerPoints to a variety of groups, from, let's see, bowling alley owners association meeting to Elks to Rotary clubs, you name it. But again, this is available not just to to us in public information, but all lottery employees, and so it's a really easy way for all of us to sing from the same sheet of music and have good access to just actually what I think are pretty nice looking graphics. And then actually, this one would surprise me. Employee education. We talk a little bit about, or I've talked a couple of times now about a lack of understanding, and that actually extends even to our own folks. I presented, walked through the snapshot, last year's snapshot, with our field staff, and these are folks that are our brand ambassadors in the field every day, interacting with the public, and they know what lottery does, or at least they think they know what lottery does. But when we started walking through the dollars and the actual beneficiaries and the slices of the revenue pie, who got what, there was a lot of ahas and wow, I didn't know that. And so I think it was actually a really useful tool. A lot of them asked for more printed copies so that they could have them just in their vans. So if they get asked a question, or someone, they come across someone who says, oh, well, no one ever wins. Well, did you know, actually, 92% of all that money comes to you. So really just providing our folks with the information so that they can actually be our brand ambassadors too. And so for new this year, couple of things. We've got more timely beneficiary, winner, and retailer stories. Last year being our first year, the stories that were featured, the winners, it was kind of all-time ever. Some of the features were kind of stale, honestly, a couple of years old. So anything you see in this year's snapshot is going to be, it will have happened either in fiscal year 2018 or calendar year 2018. And so again, it should just be a little bit more relevant. We've got call-outs in there to web-based content that lives on our website. Last year's version was really a print-only document. We've started, this year is kind of a transitional year. We started moving to a more digital friendly format, and actually doing some of those call-outs and connections to some of the web-based content. As we look to 2019, we're really going to approach it with a digital first, or from a digital first perspective. And really what that means is the last 2 years, this year included, we designed a print brochure or a print product, and then we translated it into a digital format. That digital format last year was just a PDF. This year, it's a more engaging digital version. Next year, essentially, when we approach this work, we're building a website, a micro website, and then we will figure out how to make that print friendly. What we find is that having that digital version, or even just a link to share, makes it just exponentially easier to share with folks, and frankly a lot cheaper because we're not doing the printing. So
Matt, are you trying to get away from print entirely?
I don't think we'll ever get away from print entirely, just because depending on the audience, depending on the individual, it's nice to have something that they can actually hold You know, as I mentioned, I've got access to all this stuff digitally, and I still have a printed copy on my desk that's kind of dog-eared because sometimes it's just easier to flip through that. So I think we'll always have a version of that, but in a digital format, it provides us some opportunity to be a little bit more engaging. And so actually, this falls into the this just in category. So just this week, we got the digital version kind of rolled out. It doesn't exist. We're not promoting it on the website yet anywhere, but I wanted to kind of walk you through, at least show you kind of what we're talking about in terms of what this year's version is going to look like, and then kind of okay, so Taylor's going to bring that up. And we're not going to walk through the whole thing because you guys have a printed version with you, but I just wanted to show you some examples of kind of what we can do digitally versus in print. And in a couple of them, in your print version, it's a story and there's a picture. In the digital version, we're able to actually use some of the video assets that we've created. I think one of them in there is Meacham Creek, if we can scroll down, hopefully. Got a nice picture, Barry, there.
Very nice.
So
that can get edited out. Thank you very much.
Did Bill take that picture?
Yeah.
On that stellar equipment.
So actually, I'll just pause here for a second. One of the other things that we're really trying to do a better job of is making some of the intentional connections. So you saw this page in Stacy's presentation, and we actually pulled some of that information directly from hers into ours, because really the snapshot, one of the other the things that we want it to be is kind of a teaser. You know, here's some of the basic high level with pathways to find out more information, and so that's an example of that. So let's keep scrolling down. There's an embedded video in there, and if we keep going down, you already saw that one. But like here, so this is we have that Meacham Creek story in the print version, but earlier this year, Lottery worked with OEB to develop a number of these vignettes around watershed enhancement projects. And so they're really good videos. They're really well done, and just trying to get more eyeballs on them. And we think this is a great way to do that. And it just makes it, it's just a more engaging format. So with that, I am done. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions or comments? Well, this is really impressive, and I just at a very high level want to say that one of the things I appreciate the most about the lottery is that you tell us you're going to do something. I remember last year you talking about this and saying where you were headed on the digital side, and then you actually execute. And I know that sounds odd, but there are a lot of entities out there that don't actually execute after they tell you they're going to do it. So really nice.
Thank you.
All right. So I think with that, unless there's any other business or anything the other commissioners want to raise at this time, this concludes today's meeting of the Oregon State Lottery Commission. The next meeting is scheduled on Friday, February 22nd. Commissioners will attend this meeting via telephone, and the agenda will be limited to items that need to be addressed by the commission. The public is welcome to attend and listen, but the agenda will not include public comment. The next opportunity for public comment will be at the March 22nd, 2019 meeting. Thank you all for coming, and the meeting is adjourned.